"I don't deserve you," the obese girl cried. But Mountain Man only held her tighter. "Get out of my house, you fat pig." Those were the last words Evangeline Harper heard before the door slammed in her face and the world turned white. Montana, winter of 1903. The kind of blizzard old men swore they'd never seen before. Wind screamed down from the peaks like a living thing, tearing at trees, clawing at roofs, picking up the snow and hurling it sideways so hard it stung bare skin like knives. At 30 degrees below zero, a human being could freeze to death in less than an hour. Ava had already been out there for 3 days. She stumbled along a narrow trail half buried beneath drifts, her red hair matted with ice, her cheeks raw and burning. Her dress was nothing but thin cotton torn at the hem, flapping around her thighs. No coat, no boots, only stockings with holes worn through the heels and toes so that every step ground ice into cracked flesh. Her body was soft, rounded, the kind the town liked to laugh at. 23 years old, 5'3", nearly 190 pounds. A maid, an orphan, a nobody. Tonight, even her own body felt like it was dragging her down, heavy and clumsy in the snow. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each one a cloud that vanished instantly in the screaming wind. She knew she was dying. Her thoughts kept slipping back again and again to the moment it all broke. 3 nights earlier, in the glittering parlor of the Ashford estate, she had stood barefoot on polished hardwood while Mrs. Victoria Ashford glared at her over the rim of a crystal glass. "You dare refuse my son?" the older woman had hissed, silk skirts whispering as she stepped closer. "You? A fat little orphan maid with nothing to your name?" Ava had tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't love Mr. Richard. I can't marry a man I don't love." Richard Ashford had lurched forward, cheeks flushed with rage and drink. His hand cracked across her face so hard she saw stars. "You should be grateful I even looked at you," he spat. "Nobody else wants a fat sow like you." Victoria's voice had turned to ice. "You are dismissed. No wages, no references. You've eaten our food and slept under our roof for 5 years. Consider it a debt you can never repay. Get out." "But there's a storm," Ava had whispered. "I'll die out there." "That," Victoria replied, "is no concern of mine." The front door had opened. 2 footmen had dragged her out and thrown her into the snow like trash. The door slammed. The lock clicked. No one came when she pounded. No one listened when she begged. Now, 3 days later, her legs gave out. She collapsed into a drift, snow swallowing her like a white, frozen grave. Her fingers wouldn't move. Her lips were blue, cracked, bleeding. Her eyes fluttered. "Mama," she whispered into the wind, "I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough." The storm howled over her, uncaring. For a long moment, there was nothing but the scream of the wind and the pounding of her slowing heart. Then, crunch! Heavy footsteps in the snow. A shadow fell across her, blocking the stinging flakes from her face. A deep voice, rough as gravel and warm as firelight, rumbled above her. "Hell," the stranger muttered. "What fool left you out here to die?" She tried to open her eyes. All she saw was a blur of dark beard, snow-slicked coat, and worried gray eyes before the world finally went black. Before I tell you what happens when she wakes up in his cabin, safe but convinced she doesn't deserve it, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from right now? Warmth, real, crackling, impossible warmth. That was the first thing Eva felt as consciousness clawed its way back to her. Not the sting of snow slicing her skin, not the numbness creeping up her legs, not the icy wind that had howled inside her bones for days. Just heat, thick, all-consuming, glorious heat. She blinked slowly, her eyelashes stiff with dried frost. A wooden ceiling swam into view above her, thick beams, darkened by years of smoke. The soft glow of firelight flickered along the walls. Something heavy was draped over her, something warm and soft. A blanket, a real blanket. Her fingers twitched beneath it, and they moved. They actually moved. That alone nearly made her cry. "You're awake." The voice came from the doorway, deep, low, rough in a way that sounded like he didn't use it often. Ava turned her head, wincing at the tightness in her neck. A man filled the doorway, filled it. He stood nearly 6'5", broad enough that the frame seemed to shrink around him. Thick winter furs hung from his shoulders, and snow still clung to the edges of his dark beard. His hair was long, tied loosely at the nape, streaked with early silver. His eyes, gray and piercing, studied her with a kind of quiet intensity that made her chest tighten. He carried steam in his hands. Tea, perhaps broth. Her voice cracked. Where am I?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a controlled, quiet motion, as if he refused to let the wind intrude too loudly on the room. "My cabin," he said simply. "Eagle's Ridge." That meant she was at least 20 miles from Pinewood. She shouldn't have survived the first mile. "Here," he added, setting the mug on a small table. "Drink. Slowly." Ava pushed herself up slightly. Pain shot through her legs. She gasped. He moved fast, one large hand hovering near her back, but not touching. "Don't force it," he murmured. "Your limbs were nearly frozen solid." She swallowed hard. Did you carry me?" He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened. "You were half buried in a drift," he said finally. "If I'd been 10 minutes later." He didn't finish. Ava lowered her gaze. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me?" For a long moment, the only sound was the fire. Then, "Because leaving someone to die in the snow isn't something I can do." Simple words, but something in his voice carried a weight she didn't understand yet. He stepped closer, lifting the mug. "Drink." Her fingers brushed his as she took it. She flinched, not at him, but at herself, at the realization she was wearing not her dress. A thick wool shirt hung off her body, tied loosely at the waist with a strip of cloth to keep it from swallowing her whole. "Your clothes were frozen through," he said, reading her expression instantly. "You'd have lost limbs if I left them on." Ava's face burned. "You saw?" "No," he said sharply, almost offended. "I worked by lamplight and blankets. You were never uncovered." Heat spread in her cheeks. Not humiliation this time. Something different. Something strange. "You were unconscious for almost 3 days," he added. "I kept the fire going, tried to get water down your throat, didn't know if you'd wake." 3 days. 3 days of his time, spent on her. She shook her head. I don't deserve." His eyes flashed, firm and unyielding. "Stop." The word landed with surprising force. Ava froze. "You were dying," he said quietly. "Deserving had nothing to do with it." Her throat tightened. Her vision blurred. She blinked fast, but the tears slipped anyway. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I've never been taken care of like this. Not since my parents died. I thought I was dreaming." He didn't step closer, but he didn't pull away either. "I'm Josiah Blackwood," he said after a moment, "and you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Ava hugged the blanket to her chest. My name is Evangeline Harper, but people call me Eva. He nodded, just once. Ava, he repeated, and somehow her name sounded different in his voice. Solid, real, worth saying. She sipped the tea. It tasted like herbs and smoke, strong and comforting. After a moment she whispered, You saved my life. Josiah shrugged one shoulder, gaze drifting toward the snow-lashed window. Had a spare set of arms that night, that's all. But his eyes said something else, something she wasn't ready to understand yet. He turned toward the door. Rest. You're not leaving this cabin until you can walk without shaking. Ava's heart twisted. You mean you're letting me stay? He paused. I'm not letting you walk back into that storm. Then he opened the door, stepped out, and closed it behind him, leaving Ava in the quiet warmth, clutching a mug between trembling hands, wondering why a stranger would risk his life for someone like her. The next morning, Ava woke to the faint scent of pine and something warm simmering. Her body felt heavy, but no longer numb. She pushed herself upright slowly, fingers gripping the edge of the quilt Josiah had wrapped her in. Outside her door, she could hear him moving, measured steps, the scrape of a chair, the metallic clink of a pot. Everything about him sounded controlled, deliberate. A man who kept his world orderly so nothing could surprise him again. She swallowed hard, gathering the courage to step out. The cabin opened into a long main room, stone hearth glowing, shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and preserves, a sturdy table made from logs hewn smooth. Snow battered the windows like fists, but inside the world felt strangely gentle. Josiah stood at the stove, stirring something in a small iron pot. When he heard her footsteps, he didn't turn. You shouldn't be on your feet yet, he said. No greeting, no welcome back to the living, just a fact, as if facts kept him safe. Ava clasped her hands. I'm feeling stronger today. You're not. He ladled soup into a bowl. Sit. She obeyed, easing into the nearest chair. The heat of the room made her cheeks warm. When he set the bowl before her, steam curled upward, carrying the scent of broth and herbs. Eat slowly, he said, crossing his arms. Your stomach won't handle much. Ava lifted the spoon. Thank you for everything. Josiah grunted, neither acceptance nor rejection, just something in between. She studied him quietly. In firelight, his features looked carved from the same mountains he lived in, strong, enduring, solitary. But the shadows beneath his eyes, those looked like grief. She wanted to understand him, wanted to know the man who had saved her with such fierce determination that it made her chest ache. Why do you live up here alone? She asked softly. His jaw flexed. Because it's easier. Easier than what? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, grabbing a piece of firewood and tossing it into the hearth with a force that startled her. Sparks jumped. He stared into them for a long moment. Finally, he said, People talk. People judge. People take more than they give. Up here, it's just me. Just the work. Quiet. Predictable. Ava lowered her gaze. I know what that feels like. That made him turn his head slightly, gray eyes narrowing. What do you mean? She hesitated. Her past felt like a bruise pressed too often. I worked for the Ashfords, she said, as a housemaid. They said they were giving me a home, but I was never part of anything. Not really. Josiah's brows drew together. They treated you poorly. That's an understatement, she murmured, stirring her soup. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Ava swallowed. When I refused to marry their son, They threw me out, no coat, no shoes, straight into the storm. Now he fully turned to her, disbelief tightening his features. They left you to die? She nodded, voice trembling. And I would have, if you hadn't found me. He stared at her for a long moment, long enough that she lowered her eyes again. Then, in a voice low and strained, he said, "People like that don't deserve a breath of this world." His anger wasn't loud. It was quiet, dangerous, the kind that grew from experience and not impulse. Ava took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry if my being here causes you trouble." "It doesn't," he said quickly, too quickly. She looked up, their eyes locked. He looked away first. "You'll be able to travel in a week," he said. "Maybe less. There's a town south of here, Greystone. Good folk. They'll help you find work." Her spoon paused halfway to her lips. "You want me to leave?" Josiah clenched his jaw. "It's safer for both of us." Ava's heart twisted. "I don't understand. Have I done something wrong?" "No." "Then why?" "Because," he cut in sharply, then exhaled, scrubbing a hand down his beard. "Because having someone else here, it complicates things." She waited. He didn't continue. He couldn't. Something in his eyes flickered. Fear, longing, guilt tangled together. Ava's voice softened. "Josiah, after what you've done for me, I won't be a burden." "You're not," he said, almost too quietly to hear. "That's the problem." Her heart stilled. He turned away again, grabbing his coat. "I'll be chopping firewood. Stay warm." He stepped outside before she could speak. The door shut. The wind swallowed him. And Ava sat there, hands trembling around her spoon, realizing she wasn't imagining it. Josiah Blackwood was terrified of her, not because she was dangerous, not because she was unwanted, but because she was starting to mean something, and he didn't know how to survive meaning something ever again. Morning came softly in the mountains, thin bands of light slipping through the shutters, the smell of pine smoke lingering from the dying embers. Ava woke before Josiah for the first time. Her body still ached, but now she could move without dizziness, without fear that her legs would betray her. She eased out of bed, wrapped herself in the blanket he'd given her, and stepped into the hall. The cabin felt different in the quiet dawn. It was still unguarded, almost tender. Boots were lined neatly beside the door. A half-carved wooden spoon sat on the table. A jacket hung on a peg, one sleeve torn slightly, probably from dragging her through the snow. Ava inhaled deeply. This place felt like safety. It felt like hope. And she wanted, desperately, to give something back. She crept into the kitchen and found what she needed: flour, salt, a jar of lard, a crock of butter. Josiah must have churned himself. Her hands moved instinctively, shaping dough, heating the stove, preparing the simplest biscuits her mother once taught her to make before the world had gone cold. By the time Josiah opened his door, the smell of baking filled the cabin. He stepped out wearing only trousers and a linen shirt, hair loose around his shoulders. The scars across his arm and collarbone caught the firelight. He froze when he saw her at the stove. "What are you doing?" His voice was sharp, not angry, but startled, frightened even. Ava turned, wiping flour from her hands. "I made breakfast." "You shouldn't be on your feet," he replied. "You should be resting." "I'm well enough today," she said softly, "and you've cared for me for days. I wanted to do something for you." Josiah exhaled, a sound halfway between frustration and something softer. "You don't owe me anything, Ava." "I know," she whispered, "but I want to." That stopped him. His gray eyes flickered, shadows shifting like storm clouds. He didn't say anything more. He simply sat down at the table and watched while she plated the biscuits and ladled out the stew she reheated. She set the bowl before him with trembling hands. He took a bite. His head lowered. His shoulders rose and fell. For a moment she thought she'd done something wrong. Then his breath shuddered. This tastes like... He stopped. His throat worked tightly. Like something I haven't had in a long time. Ava swallowed, unsure. If it's bad, I can... It's not bad. His voice was thick. It's familiar. Something in her chest ached. Not the pain of being unwanted, but the pain of understanding. He wasn't pushing her away because he disliked her. He was pushing her away because she reminded him of warmth, of someone he had loved and lost, of everything he thought he'd buried in the snow 15 years ago. Ava sat across from him and broke her biscuit in half. Josiah, she said quietly, I don't want to replace her. He stiffened, jaw tightening. You don't know what you're talking about. I heard you, she said gently, in your sleep. I heard you calling her name. He inhaled sharply, wounded, defensive. Ava continued softly. You loved her. I respect that. I'm not here to take her place. His eyes lifted slowly, and she felt the weight of that grief, ancient and raw and endless. You shouldn't be here at all, he murmured. If you stay, it'll hurt, for both of us. She shook her head. You saved my life. I want to help you. I want to be here, even if it's only until I'm strong enough to leave. His gaze sharpened, pained, but searching. She stood. Let me clean up. You should rest. I know you didn't sleep. He didn't answer, but he didn't stop her either. For hours Ava worked quietly, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, folding blankets. Josiah pretended not to watch, but his gaze followed her every time she passed near the window where he chopped wood. And slowly the cabin changed. Her touch softened it. A clean table here, a mended tear in his coat there, flowers placed in a small cup beside the bed. None of it belonged to him, but all of it began to feel like it belonged with him. At noon, Ava stepped outside to hang the freshly washed linens. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. Behind her, she heard heavy footsteps crunch across the snow. Josiah stopped a few feet away. You shouldn't be lifting anything. She didn't turn. I'm strong enough. That's not the point. She looked at him then, truly looked. His hands were red from the cold, knuckles scraped, breath visible in the icy air. His eyes held something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not of the storm, not of danger, of losing something again. Josiah, she whispered, I'm not trying to make this place mine. But you are, he said quietly. Every corner of this cabin looks different with you in it, feels different, and He stopped. His throat worked, and I don't know what to do with that. Ava stepped closer, timid but determined. Then let me help you. Let me stay until you want me gone, not because you're afraid I'll take her place, but because you genuinely don't want me here. He stared down at her, chest rising and falling unevenly. What if I already know that's not true? Her lips parted. Hope, small, trembling, fluttered in her stomach. He breathed out slowly, voice low. You're kind. You're gentle. You make this place feel alive again, and I haven't felt alive in a long, long time. Ava's vision blurred. Josiah? But, he whispered, letting you stay means letting myself feel something again, and I'm not sure I can survive losing anything I care about one more time. She reached for him, her hand small, trembling, and touched his forearm. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to let me exist in your world. That's all. His eyes closed. Her touch remained, and for a moment, for a single, fragile breath, he leaned into it. Only a moment. Then he stepped back, voice strained. You can stay, for now, until the storm passes. Ava nodded, though her heart thundered with something stronger than gratitude. He wasn't ready to admit what was growing between them, but he didn't send her away, and that alone lit a warmth inside her that no winter could put out. Snow had stopped falling by the fourth morning, leaving the mountains in a white silence so complete it felt holy. Ava woke early, wrapped herself in the wool shawl Josiah had left for her, and stepped softly into the main room. Josiah was already up. He always was, a man whose grief had turned the sunrise into his only companion. He stood before the window, sharpening an axe. Each drag of the blade against the stone was slow, precise, controlled. He didn't turn when he heard her footsteps, but his shoulders shifted the slightest bit. You slept longer today, he said, only by a little. She smiled gently. Did you rest at all? Silence, which meant no. Ava set a pot of water on the stove. You don't have to watch over me every night. I'm much stronger now. Josiah wiped the axe clean. It isn't you I'm watching for. The words dropped like stones. Ava froze. What do you mean? He finally turned, and something hard flickered in his gray eyes. Tracks near the ridge. 2 sets. They weren't mine. Fear prickled along her spine. Animals? Boot prints? He corrected softly. Her breath caught. Someone was up here, he continued, watching the cabin. Ava's knees weakened. She grabbed the back of a chair. Josiah, it might be the Ashfords, he finished grimly. I know. Her pulse hammered. They'll drag me back. They'll punish me, or worse, you're not going back. Josiah's voice was so low, so certain, that it steadied the ground beneath her, but fear still coiled inside her chest. Victoria Ashford wanted me married to her son so badly she threatened to dock my pay every time I resisted. When I refused a final time, Ava swallowed hard. She said I'd regret it until the day I died. Josiah's jaw tightened, and now she wants to make good on that threat. Ava wrapped her arms around herself. She'll tell the sheriff I stole something. She'll lie. She's done it before. That's not your fault. It doesn't matter. People believe her, always. Josiah crossed the room in 3 long strides. Ava stiffened, not out of fear of him, but from how his presence filled the space, how his warmth softened the cold inside her. Ava, he said quietly, I won't let anyone take you. Her voice trembled. But you said I can't stay forever. He took a slow breath. I said I didn't know if I could handle what it would mean if you did. She blinked. And now? He held her gaze, steady, unflinching. Now it means something else entirely. Now it means keeping you safe. Her heart thudded painfully. Josiah. But he stepped back, breaking the moment before it could break him. We need a plan, he said. You're not strong enough for a long journey, and if the Ashfords are tracking you, they'll expect you to run south. Ava nodded weakly. What do? We stay. We prepare. And if they come... His expression hardened into the quiet, lethal calm of a man who had survived too much. I'll make sure they leave without you. Ava touched his sleeve hesitantly. Josiah, I don't want you hurt because of me. He looked down at her hand, small, trembling, resting against his scarred forearm. Something in his eyes softened, just a fraction. "You think too little of yourself, Ava," he murmured. "Anyone would be a fool not to protect you." Her throat tightened. "No one ever has." His jaw clenched. Then they were blind. She wanted to answer. She wanted to say everything swelling inside her chest. But the moment slipped away as he turned toward the door. "I'm checking the perimeter," he said. "Stay inside. Bar the door behind me." She waited until he stepped out before sliding the iron latch into place. Then the silence returned, but now it felt different. He wasn't afraid of her presence. He was afraid of losing it. Hours later, after she'd cleaned, cooked, and tried to still her shaking hands, she heard him return. Snow clung to his boots. His face was grim. "They're close," he said simply. 2 miles down the ridge. They camped overnight." Ava's breath hitched. "Are they coming today?" "Not yet. They're scouting." He shrugged off his coat and hung it near the fire. "But they're not woodsmen. They're loud, sloppy, afraid of the dark." Ava hugged herself. Maybe they'll give up. He didn't sugarcoat it. "They won't." Ava sank onto a chair, head in her hands. "I can't go back. I can't." Josiah knelt before her, slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wounded deer. "Ava," he said firmly, "look at me." She lifted her eyes. His face was close, too close, and yet she didn't pull away. "You survived a blizzard alone," he said. "You survived cruelty from people who should have sheltered you. You didn't break." His voice thickened. "You didn't even let yourself hate them." Tears spilled down her cheeks. He reached out as if to wipe them, then stopped, his hand hovering a breath away from her skin. He wanted to touch her. He forced himself not to. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "you're staying here, with me." "Why?" she breathed. "Why do you care this much?" His voice dropped to a voice he'd never used with her before, raw, unarmored. "Because losing one woman in the snow was more pain than any man deserves." His eyes burned. "I won't lose another." Ava's heart cracked open. "Josiah." She reached for him this time, her hand landing over his, warm, solid, real. He didn't move away. He didn't breathe. Then slowly, so slowly she felt every heartbeat, his fingers curled around hers. A quiet promise, a dangerous one, a necessary one. Outside, the Ashfords were coming. Inside, something else was happening. Something neither of them could fight much longer. The knock came just after noon. Not a polite tap, not a hesitant request. A hammering, fist against wood, loud enough to shake snow from the rafters. Ava froze where she stood by the hearth. Josiah, who had been stacking firewood near the door, straightened slowly. His entire body went still, shoulders squared, breath measured, eyes sharpening like a blade being drawn. The knock came again. "Blackwood!" A man's voice barked from outside. "Open up! We know she's in there!" Ava's pulse erupted into a wild, panicked rhythm. "They found us," she whispered. Josiah didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the rifle leaning against the wall, checking the chamber with practiced efficiency. He didn't look at her when he spoke, because if he did, if he saw her fear, he might not stay calm. "You'll stand behind me," he said, "no matter what happens." She swallowed. "Yes." Another voice joined the first, sharper, shrill with entitlement. "Blackwood, you have something that belongs to me." Victoria Ashford. Ava's stomach twisted. Josiah stepped toward the door, positioning himself like a shield. "You ready?" he asked quietly. "No," Ava whispered, "but I'll stand with you anyway." He glanced back, just long enough to meet her eyes, a flicker of something fierce and proud crossing his features. Then he unlatched the door. Cold wind and whirling snow burst inside. On the porch stood 3 figures: Sheriff Alden, with his hand on his gun, Victoria Ashford wrapped in a luxurious mink coat, and Richard Ashford, red-faced and furious. Victoria jabbed a finger toward the cabin interior. "There, she's right there, the thief who stole from my home." Josiah didn't move. "She didn't steal anything." "She stole time," Victoria snapped. "Stole wages, stole my son's future." Richard stepped forward, sneering. "That fat little rat ran out on me. She belongs in jail." Ava flinched, but she didn't hide. Josiah's voice dropped into something cold. "The only criminals I see are the ones standing on my porch." Sheriff Alden puffed up. "Now, Josiah, don't make this difficult. Miss Harper here is wanted for desertion of employment, violation of contract, and petty theft." "There was no contract," Ava said softly, stepping forward despite Josiah's stiffening posture. "They made one up. I never signed anything." "Liar!" Victoria shrieked. Josiah held out an arm, subtly shielding Ava behind him. "You're not taking her." Sheriff Alden shifted uneasily. "Blackwood, she's a runaway servant. You can't harbor her." Josiah's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "She's not a servant. She's a free woman who nearly died because of them." Victoria scoffed. "Her problems aren't our fault." "You threw her out barefoot in a blizzard," Josiah snapped. The sheriff hesitated, long enough to show he knew exactly what the Ashfords had done, but greed and fear tied his hands. "Move aside, Blackwood." "No." One word. Solid as stone. Final as a loaded gun. Richard shoved forward. "Just hand her over. She's worthless trash anyway." Josiah moved faster than any of them expected. He stepped between Richard and the doorway towering over him. "She's not trash," Josiah said quietly, "and if you say another word about her, I'll put you face first in the snow." Richard's bravado evaporated instantly. Victoria hissed, "Sheriff, arrest him!" Alden's hand hovered near his holster, but he knew what drawing would mean. Josiah Blackwood wasn't a man you pulled a gun on unless you had already written your will. "Sheriff," Ava said, forcing her trembling voice to steady, "may I speak?" Alden nodded weakly. Victoria glared. Ava stepped out from behind Josiah, but stayed close enough to feel the heat of his presence. "I'm not going back with them," she said. "They mistreated me for years. They gave me no pay, no contract, no protection, and when I refused a marriage I didn't want, they threw me into a storm to die." Richard laughed bitterly. "Drama queen." Josiah took a step toward him. Richard shut up instantly. Ava continued, voice shaking but unbroken. "If you take me, you'll be returning me to the people who tried to kill me. That makes you responsible for whatever happens next." The sheriff swallowed. Victoria shrieked. "She's manipulating you. She's a liar, a disgrace, a—" Josiah's voice cut through her words like a blade. "She's under my protection. If you want her, you'll have to take her from me." The porch went silent. Wind howled. Sheriff Alden looked at the cabin, at the mountain man who could break him in half, at the terrified girl who had somehow found the courage to stand. Then he lowered his hand. "This isn't worth dying over," he muttered. "We're leaving." Victoria exploded. "You coward! Bring her out here!" But Josiah closed the door before she finished. Ava didn't breathe until he slid the bar shut. When he turned around, his chest rose and fell with controlled fury. "You stood strong," he said softly. Ava's voice broke. Because you were beside me. Slowly, cautiously, Josiah reached for her cheek, his fingertips trembling. You're safe, he whispered. As long as I'm breathing, you're safe. Her heart shattered and reformed all at once. The cabin didn't feel the same after the Ashfords rode away. The wind still hissed against the timber walls. The hearth still glowed gold. The kettle still sang softly on the iron hook. But something in the air had shifted. Ava sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of steaming tea she wasn't drinking. Her pulse still raced from the confrontation. Her knees trembled beneath her skirt. Josiah moved quietly around the room, extinguishing lamps, adding logs to the fire, checking that the doors were secure, every action precise, protective, controlled. But she could sense the storm inside him. Finally, he stopped. He stood near the fire, one hand braced on the mantel, his broad back rising and falling with heavy breaths. The flames cast gold across his shoulders, warming the edge of his jaw, softening the hard lines of a man who had carried his grief alone for far too long. Ava swallowed. Are you angry with me? Josiah didn't answer at first. He turned slowly, eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart stumble. I'm angry, he said quietly, but not at you. She lowered her gaze. I shouldn't have stepped forward. I made everything worse. No. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. You were brave, braver than you know. He knelt in front of her, this massive man lowering himself until his face was level with hers. She stiffened, unsure what to do with the closeness, the warmth, the way his presence filled the air around her. Ava, he said softly, look at me. She lifted her eyes. His voice gentled even more. You think you don't deserve protection. You think you don't deserve me standing in front of you. You think you're a burden. I see all that fear in you. Her throat tightened. Because it's true. Josiah shook his head. No, it's what they made you believe. Ava tried to look away, but he caught her chin, not forcefully, just enough to keep her from retreating. You stood beside me today, he said, not behind me, not hiding. You faced the people who tried to destroy you. I've seen warriors with less courage. Ava's voice cracked. I'm not brave. I'm not strong. I'm just me. And that's enough, he said. Her breath trembled. I don't deserve you. Josiah leaned in until their foreheads touched, his breath warm against her skin. Then I'll say this as many times as I need to. You deserve every ounce of kindness I can give, every moment of safety, every bit of warmth in this cabin. You deserve someone who will fight for you, and I'm choosing to be that someone. Her tears fell, slow, silent. Josiah brushed one away with his thumb. I'm choosing you, he whispered. Her heart didn't break this time. It opened. She lifted her hand, tentative, shaking, and placed it over his. He closed his fingers around hers, steady and sure. Josiah, she breathed. He rose slowly, helping her stand. The room glowed with the soft crackle of fire, shadows dancing on the walls as if blessing what was about to change. You're safe here, he murmured, if you'll have this place, if you'll have me. Ava's voice was barely a whisper. I want to stay. I want you. Josiah exhaled, a long, shuddering breath of relief, before pulling her into his arms. And in that quiet mountain cabin, with winter pressing close outside, 2 wounded lives finally found a place to begin again. Some loves don't arrive gently. They come in storms and broken nights, in the trembling spaces where two wounded souls finally dare to believe they're worth choosing. Ava walked into that blizzard thinking she had no value. Josiah carried years of grief, believing he'd never love again. Yet somehow, on a frozen mountain in Montana, they found each other, and both learned the same truth. Even the most shattered heart deserves warmth. If you're listening right now, tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story from? Your comments turn these tales into shared fires in the dark. And if you still believe in love, stay close. The next story is already waiting for you.